Hello YouTube, this is DVD Review Studios here, and today I'm going to be doing a review of the Indiana Jones movie franchise on DVD. So of course this includes Raiders of the Lost Ark, The Temple of Doom, The Last Crusade, my personal favourite and honestly one of my favourite movies of all time. I cannot wait to discuss this film, and the runs of the litter, should I say, the fourth film from 2008, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So before I review each movie individually, here's a brief overview of the DVDs. So the original trilogy, each one is rated PG and digitally remastered, presented in widescreen, and of course that goes for all three movies. And then we have the fourth film. Nothing too spectacular about this release, it's a double disc set, nice glossy slipcover, and rated 12. And the overall franchise, obviously it's an action-adventure genre starring Harrison Ford portraying his most iconic character, other than Han Solo, of Indiana Jones. And throughout each movie he's joined by a whole array of different actors and actresses portraying some fantastic characters. And I love these movies just because there's no continuity to them. Each one is just a random chapter of Indiana Jones' life with a different adventure, and you could really show somebody who dreadfully hasn't seen an Indiana Jones movie, you could show them any of these movies, such as Raiders to blow them away, Temple of Doom to sort of creep them out slightly, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull to really crucify somebody if you were that mean, and honestly I think the only exception to that is The Last Crusade, just because the build to The Last Crusade is phenomenal. The ending to the movie is something that I really do treasure quite dearly, and I shall obviously discuss that when I review the film itself. But the films are fantastic, I love them, my second favourite movie franchise. So let's get to the review of Raiders. So first up we have Raiders of the Lost Ark. This movie came out in 1981 and was of course directed by Steven Spielberg, who directed the entire franchise of the Indiana Jones movies, and this particular chapter is set in 1936, quite literally midway through the overall rise to power of the Nazis, as Hitler wasn't appointed to the position of Chancellor of Germany till 1933, and the Second World War of course didn't begin till 1939, so this is quite a crucial year, and the Indiana Jones take on that particular year of 36. So the overall film itself is phenomenal. I love the Nazis as the overall main antagonist. The Nazis throughout the entire franchise of the Indiana Jones films are phenomenal, but in Raiders of the Lost Ark, they are fantastic, and I love the main villain, who is Major Arnold Toth. I think that's how his name is pronounced, who has got to be one of the creepiest villains I have ever seen in any action-adventure movie, especially his demise at the end, which obviously will remain within people's minds for generations to come. But the overall accent of the character, the scar on his hand, just a really creepy character overall, but I really do quite like that about the character. And the overall storyline for the film is basically just a race against time, as Indiana Jones as an archaeologist is approached by the US government to go ahead and track down the Ark of the Covenant, which is very close to being discovered by the Nazis, and they want Indy to find it before they do because they want to use it for their evil world domination plots. And overall the film is fantastic, a really great suspenseful race against time, and Indiana Jones, portrayed by Harrison Ford, is just a fantastic character, my favourite portrayal of a character, and just got to one of the best fictional characters ever created. So Indiana Jones, great character, and a great side character is Marion Ravenwood, in my opinion, even though those sequences in Cairo where she's being kidnapped and all the side streets are very busy as Indiana Jones runs through frantically trying to find her, a little bit tedious, but the character overall, especially in the bar sequence where she's trying to drink that guy under the table quite literally, is fantastic, and I really liked the sequences where she had the medallion too, which is quite cool. Which brings me to the overall iconography of the film. I love all the iconic sequences, such as when Indy uses the particularly sized pole to discover where the location of the Ark is, using the medallion and the sun. Great scene, one of my personal favourites from the film. The beginning sequence as Indy runs from the boulder as he tries to escape with the golden idol. Fantastic sequence, and overall the ending is fantastic as well, where Indy says, "Don't look, Marion," as the ghosts completely obliterate the Nazi army. So yeah, overall fantastic film, got to be one of the best action-adventure films ever made, and in my opinion has got to be one of the best Indiana Jones movies out there. Next up we have The Temple of Doom. This film came out in 1984 and is sort of a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, with the events of this film taking place in 1935. And the overall film itself wasn't really as well received as Raiders, which is quite surprising. This was well known as the much more darker Indiana Jones film, with it being incredibly creepy, facing quite a lot of controversy, such as the representation of India, which is where the majority of the film is set, the incredibly creepy religious cult led by Mola Ram, including the slave children, and the really heavily exaggerated blood and gore, which, I mean, it was the 80s, but many people were left quite distraught about that, and the irritating side characters of Willie Scott and Short Round, which I personally don't agree with, but many reviews do state that these characters are very unlikable, which I don't agree with. I do quite like Short Round as a character, and Willie Scott, even though she's sort of a damsel in distress, constantly screaming, which obviously would enrage somebody, I do think there is quite a lot of hilarity to gain from that, and the character of Indy obviously has a different kind of perspective to him in this film in comparison to Raiders. So I did quite enjoy this film. I hated it the first time I watched it, and that was probably because I just wasn't really too fond of the overall creepiness of the religious cult and the various characters that were possessed, and it just really wasn't something that I was too into, to be honest. But I really do quite like the film now. It's grown on me after the many times I've watched it, and I think the more you watch this film, the more you will appreciate it, which is certainly what I've done. So if you're like me and didn't really appreciate this film the first time, definitely rewatch it. It might give you a different perspective of this film in particular. So the overall storyline of this film, it begins with a little deal gone wrong in Shanghai as Indiana Jones escapes with Short Round and Willie Scott, and they end up travelling to India accidentally, and literally a village that prophesized them falling from the sky ends up asking them to go and retrieve this little Sankara stone which was stolen from the village, along with freeing the child slaves. And the film itself does have quite a cool positive message at the end, and I really enjoyed it. So Temple of Doom isn't a bad film, and I really do disagree with the hatred that it does receive. It's creepy and not necessarily the best film in the world, but it certainly doesn't deserve the hate, and I very much do appreciate the film now. So that's the Temple of Doom. Moving on, we have my personal favourite from the franchise, and that is The Last Crusade. This movie came out back in 1989, and the vast majority of this film is set in the year 1938. But I would just like to quickly highlight the very cool and very unique opening scene set in the year 1912 in the US state of Utah, featuring a very young Indiana Jones, portrayed by River Phoenix, who tragically passed away at a very young age of 23 back in 92, which is absolutely dreadful to have such talent taken away so early. But he was very lucky to be on screen with Sean Connery, which he's just a fantastic actor in this film, my personal favourite, and the chemistry between him and Ford in this film is phenomenal. One of my personal favourite things about this, but I loved that opening scene set in the year 1912 when the Cross of Coronando was unearthed in front of Indy's very eyes, and the opening scene has quite a cool reflection of the overall relationship between Indy and his father, but I also really love how the Cross of Coronando is taken from Indy at such a young age, and then we jump cut to 1938 on a really cool boat sequence where it's once again taken from him, which is quite cool and kind of hilarious, I suppose, in a rotten way. But the rest of the film overall is based around Henry Jones Sr., who is more or less the main character of this film, and he has a really cool little Grail diary, and he uses that to send to Indiana Jones after he gets taken hostage by the Nazis, so Indy can find him after he goes missing, and then they both go ahead and find the actual Holy Grail artifact in itself. So the overall film is phenomenal. I love the Nazis in this film a little bit more than I did in Raiders of the Lost Ark. In Raiders they were very menacing, but in this film they were just more prominent, and obviously we had Elsa, who was secretly a Nazi, which was one of the more interesting little developments of this film, which I quite enjoyed actually. It was sort of hit and miss for many people, but it was kind of predictable for me personally, and I also love Adolf Hitler signing the Grail diary, which is quite funny. And one thing that I did miss out when I was discussing Raiders of the Lost Ark was Salah and Marcus Brody, which I've sort of saved for my overview of The Last Crusade, because even though Salah is quite important to Raiders of the Lost Ark, I do personally prefer his performance in Last Crusade, along with Marcus Brody, who has a lot more to offer in this film, and it's tragic how the actor who portrayed him has passed away too. I think in a very close year to River Phoenix as well, but no one can last forever. But Marcus Brody in this film is fantastic and definitely brings a lot to the table in terms of the overall comedy. And the overall comedy added to this film really does make it more enjoyable, and more of a hybrid genre really of the overall gore and of the action-adventure and the comedy just makes for a perfect film in my opinion. And there are so many other things to love about this film. The iconography, the boat chase, how Elsa and Indy rise in the manhole cover in the busy restaurant in Italy, which is quite funny. There's just so much to offer with this film. The hilarious escape, which is something that honestly I have to watch over and over whenever I go on YouTube and search up Indiana Jones clips. It's just something that I love. There's so much to this film to love, so that's honestly, there's too much to discuss why this film is my favourite, but we're getting a little bit informal here. But the film Last Crusade is phenomenal. Cinematography is fantastic. The visuals are amazing. I love the Easter egg in the background for the Ark of the Covenant, which is quite cool. And there's so much to offer with this film. So definitely give this a couple of watches. If you've only seen it the once, definitely rewatch it and have a good look at the background. There's quite a lot to offer, and the visuals are phenomenal with this film, and I cannot recommend it enough. So that is The Last Crusade. And finally, we have Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This movie came out in 2008, a shocking 19 years after the success of The Last Crusade. But just looking at this film, you can instantly tell that this was just a frugal attempt at a cash grab, and it resulted in such a disastrous film. And I genuinely do not respect this film, and I do not consider this canon to the Indiana Jones franchise one bit, especially after the beautiful, evocative ending of Last Crusade. So the film in itself, there are people out there who genuinely love this film, and I have to envy those people, just because if you can get past the ludicrous Nuketown sequence involving the fridge, Shia LaBeouf constantly combing his hair, and the stupid CGI monkey scene where he swings from the vines onto the two boat cars and starts wielding a sword, and if you can get past her awful accent portrayed by Cate Blanchett, I forget her name, Irina Spalko, that stupid character who kept switching sides, and I don't even know who he is anymore. And Karen Allen wasn't as bad in this film, but and then of course Harrison Ford reprising the role of Indy. There's just so much awful shite about this film, including CGI gophers, CGI monkeys, stupid giant ants. Sorry, big damn ants. Go. The dialogue is another key factor that's wrong with this film. There's just so much wrong with this film. I mean, there's so much to go over, but that's just a brief summary. If you can get past all of that, I genuinely respect you as a member of the human race, and you have a high tolerance level for garbage than I do. So that's my little rant there. So Crystal Skull, in my opinion, is just a pointless film. It doesn't really have any kind of meaning. Indy just uncovers a crystal skull having been forced to do so, and he tries to return it to a temple, and then it turns out the skull belongs to aliens, and then those aliens try to grant the gift of power to Irina Spalko, whose head explodes, and then the alien UFO leaves planet Earth in peace. And, I mean, the visuals are quite good. I'll have to go over some good points. The visuals are good. The loving little statue dedicating the university that Indy worked at to Marcus Brody was fantastic. And there are so many other, like, tiny things, such as the image of Marcus Brody that was in a little photo frame, which is actually just a snapshot from Last Crusade, which is incredibly lazy, and I have no idea what they were going for there, but there's just added little things that are good, and obviously did mean well, but some things just do not work out. This film, in my opinion, is a travesty, and I genuinely cannot stand it, and I do not appreciate this film as being canon to the Indiana Jones franchise at all. So that's just a brief little rant and an overall summary of this film. Let me know in the comments if you genuinely do like this film, and let me know if I'm wrong with my opinions, or if you disagree, or if you can actually find some counter arguments to actually debunk what I've said. But there's the 2 discs, there's the movie, and I believe this is the special features, yeah. So that's pretty much it for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So, thanks for watching my review on the Indiana Jones movie franchise on DVD. Since we're at the conclusion of this review, I just thought I'd quickly rank these from worst to best. So the worst film, of course, is going to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull for degrading actors like John Hurt, ludicrous plot points, and Shia LaBeouf's hair, so that's going right at the bottom. Next up, we have the misunderstood film, and that is Temple of Doom. Even though I don't hate the film, it's not a bad film, but it's just certainly not as worthy as Raiders or Last Crusade. And then we have Raiders, for being a phenomenal film, but personally just not as cinematically beautiful as Last Crusade, with the evocative ending, the beautiful sunset, and the 4 main characters, or at least the 4 main popular characters of Salah, Indy, Henry, and Marcus Brody, riding off into the sunset. The most beautiful ending to any movie I've ever seen, and I will forever claim that as one of my favourite movie endings. So that's been my review of these 4 films. Let me know in the comments what your order from best to worst, or worst to best, is of the Indiana Jones movie franchise, and please leave a like, support the channel, and subscribe for more content.